Welcome to the Millionaire Next Door podcast with Robert Crutiss, CFP accredited investment fiduciary from Signature Estate and Investment Advisors. In this podcast, we help successful wealth accumulators like you looking to transition to a work optional lifestyle by helping you build strategies for growing and maintaining your wealth. Robert draws from years of experience and fiduciary responsibility and interviews guest experts to help you build reliable strategies to grow and maintain your wealth. Now, on to the show.
Thank you, everyone, for being here for another episode of the Millionaire Next Door podcast. This is episode 50, so kind of a milestone, at least for me. I had initially planned to do a really whiz-bang kind of podcast with reflecting back on where we've been. That's coming, but I do have a very, very interesting guest, a very important guest on a topic that I think is seminal and I'm seeing all the time. It sort of has to do with aging, and I'm seeing a lot of clients go through, obviously they're aging, but going through things like first stages, early or mid stages of diminished capacity, either physical or mental. Sometimes I get a tip off from the family. Sometimes we just experience it. That sets in life a whole new cascade of priorities, as you might imagine. So we want to help clients through that. We're really seeing that take off. As you may or may not know, I have what I call a value-added support team, VAST. And one of the people I've utilized through that is Mary Winter. She's my guest today. She's the founder of About Senior Solutions. They're in Monrovia, California. Welcome, Mary. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you for letting me be part of your 50th. That's quite a big deal. And congratulations.
Yeah,
Really
no, thanks. Yeah, and thanks to folks I've had literally folks who've listened to all 50, and it is fun when I listen to the early ones. We actually started talking a lot about health and wellness right from the get-go, because this podcast sort of launched out of the pandemic and when folks couldn't get together, but here we are still going strong, actually listened to in north of 100 countries, which is exceeded my expectations. I don't know if I fully understand it. So there's folks in Africa who'll probably be hearing this. So I don't know how it translates culturally, but we're getting a little astray here. Tell us about yourself, what you do, your business, your practice.
Sure.
And of course, what you're seeing and dealing with every day. So please.
Absolutely. So even someone in Africa, we're aging every single day. So there are commonalities regardless of culture and geographic location and our socioeconomic background. We have different experiences that we bring with us. And that is something that's really important for us to look at. But I am, as you mentioned, the owner and founder of About Senior Solutions. And what that is a advocacy, support, care planning organization, and we provide care plans. I am a gerontologist. That is the study of aging. Some of us go into research, some of us go into care management, as we're doing, and a variety of other things. They may even go into corporate settings and look at how to more appropriately set up environments for better work environments as people are aging. People have injuries as we age too. So looking at all of those types of things. But the thing that's most important for us is looking at what is really important for the individual. And we also want to look at prevention. So if we can avoid the crisis altogether, that is exactly what we want to do. So everybody has a planning process, or we start through the planning process at some point. So I put together a little acronym. I love doing acronyms. So I came up with something called GIFT. And GIFT is an acronym for G, gather your resources. I, inform those who you want to have part of your plan. F, to follow through to completion. You must dot your I's and complete your T's. Rob, I don't know how many times you've seen people put an estate plan or start an estate plan, but then you don't finish it. And then tell everybody what, where, and how you want your plan to be delivered. So if you've selected somebody in your estate plan to be part of your care, say that, because that's really the area we focus on, if you don't tell them what you want, how are they supposed to help you? Or you don't tell them where the plan is, how are they supposed to help you? So we want people to be empowered. And sometimes we're actually that bridge between that eventual decision maker or support person, which is often a family member or a friend. Sometimes it's professional. We have professional fiduciaries who do that work too. But we sometimes get that information prior so that the family member either doesn't need to be burdened, or there are things that they want to keep confidential until it's closer to the time that they need that support. So really, when you're planning like this, and you can be at any phase, we jump in and help. It's a gift to yourself, and it's a gift to the people that you're providing the planning for. So, and this is where you are too. You
Yeah.
provide that resource, that planning for people on their financial side, which is so essential for us to partner with.
No, 100%. But this is really interesting because I've been doing this now 28 years. I've been a certified financial planner with second and third generation clients. There was a lot of my career where I really looked at planning, and we still do planning. Planning is seminal. But as you get further along, there's a lot of things that just happen where you're in it. You're in life. Maybe they didn't execute the plan exactly, like, or they've come to you later and now you're dealing with a situation, right, that might have been planned.
Sure.
I always encourage the planning, and it's so what you're saying is you do as well, and you walk people through that plan, which is maybe ahead of time before it's needed. Is that what I hear you saying?
Absolutely. So you
Okay.
like we said,
Yeah.
you need to start somewhere, whether it's with a dollar or with an idea.
Yeah.
And so we gather that, collect those thoughts for people, and really look at, what do you
Yeah.
want? And sometimes it's really hard for people to understand or decide what they want. It may be very vague. I want to stay home, or
Yeah.
I want to live with my daughter forever. I expect my family to take care of me. And sometimes they will, and sometimes that's not a possibility. So we need to talk through those things.
Yeah.
Sometimes we look at, what do you not want? And we can really drill down to what you do want from that.
That's so crucial. I think it's great. So you would meet with the family or someone ahead of time to walk through, ideally, think through your thoughts. What is the plan? Maybe facilitate sort of a family meeting and lay all that out. Is that essentially how
Absolutely.
you'd see it? Okay.
Sure. So when somebody is really kind of putting their foot forward and really wanting to plan, that is absolutely what we do. We sit down with
That's
the
great.
individual or the couple, look at what they're planning, their ideas are for their future. How do they want to age? What is their vision of aging, and how can I help them get there? And honestly, Rob, how can you help them get there too? Because their financial piece is such a crucial component to organizing that plan. So
Right.
when we do look at what they want, we're looking at their wishes. We look at what is going to keep them safe and what is their financial situation. And these things change over time. They're different. We want different things when we're in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it may
Yeah.
change when we're in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. Well, it certainly will. And sometimes we have setbacks, like maybe a hip replacement or a broken arm. And then we go back to rising in a situation where we're back to our base again. So sometimes we just kind of sway back and forth. It's a little bit like a jet plane going a little bit out of direction, and we just get back on
Uh-huh.
course.
Yeah, that's a big focus of us is course correction. But I love what you're saying, and we could certainly partner and integrate. And this is ideal to sit down and do this. I do a lot of financial planning, so we can model things in like an expense for caregiving, or we
Mhm.
can think through this. Where I'm struck though is it can be difficult to convince people. I mean, you should have this plan, you should have it in place, but a lot of people don't do the planning, or they're not incented to act until there really is some type of more of a serious event. And then all of a sudden the light goes off. So a lot of times we're dealing with that. And I've actually introduced you to folks who ran into
Mhm.
situations where they needed a caregiver like ASAP. So that's the other side of things. But I love what you're
Absolutely.
saying. You're preaching to the choir, the planning. We did a complete podcast on our financial planning process with our planner, Julia Fallon. We can model in, but to think about these things ahead of time, because otherwise this let's say someone loses capacity, it can be very difficult to interpret what they'd actually want versus somebody saying, here's what I want. I want to be in the home, or I want to be in this facility. That's so, so valuable. I do have several families that just sort of have it triggered. Maybe they've talked to an adult child, the eldest, a daughter. Now they're acting in that behalf, but that's a giant stressor on that adult child. I see it all the time. That's a big, big
Right.
responsibility. So
It
we're also
absolutely
trying to
is.
put together teams with folks with expertise who can help them, support them through that process and kind of optimize the outcomes for, the individual, their parent. You keep mentioning a hip and that kind of, I probably 2 to 3 times a week, I'm having conversations with someone. I just got a knee surgery. I just got a hip
Mhm.
surgery. I just talked with someone yesterday who we had a conversation. She said, I'm on my way to go support a friend who's having a knee surgery tomorrow. So it's part of life. That's pretty debilitating. But yeah, keep going. These are things we see. So I could make these introductions to do that kind of planning. We get some other tip offs too, maybe from the adult child that mom or dad are really kind of slipping or moving into diminished capacity. And
Yeah.
then, you're already in it. So,
This is not an easy topic as far as
hmm
wanting to discuss these things. These are, I call them super adult conversations because they're
yeah.
not an easy thing just to roll off the tongue and talk about when you become decrepit. But let's talk about what your vision of aging really
hmm
is, and what can we do to support that joy in your life, not just falling apart. So, what can we do to really create that gift for your decision makers and for yourself so that people really they get what they want? They're happy. That's what we want to achieve for everybody that we love. We want them to be
Yeah.
happy. So, yes, you're right. Sometimes people don't plan. So, we're walking into a crisis and we work on crisis intervention all the time.
Mm.
So you still know what their financial situation is. So you know if somebody can still afford to stay home for a long period of time. Will they be able to do this for a year, 10 years, indefinitely? Do we need to look at a reverse mortgage? And that's part of your team too, I'm sure, of resources. But we look at, the plan just has to be pulled together with safety in mind. It's such a huge component. And
hmm
sometimes people can't stay home. They are not in a financial situation to keep them safe at home. Or I've quite frankly had people who have a considerable amount of funds, but some of their logic or their thinking, or they're not willing to allow support to come in, really prevents them from being able to stay home. So if we need to place somebody, we work through that too. I think the thing that's really interesting about someone moving into an assisted living setting is they all have their own character. They're all priced differently
Yeah.
and so forth, and they provide services on different levels. And some are quite grand, and some are really stripped down to the very basics, but have some wonderful caregivers. Some you would not want to go near, and
Mm.
we are familiar with those places. But I think the socialization is so important for people, whether they're living at home or whether they're in community. And it was a really interesting statistic that I pulled up recently where 78% of people who live in assisted living still feel lonely.
Mm.
And that's just such a shame. And I think we need to do a better job. And something that it's really important in our office is to make sure that those connections are happening for people, because we don't want them to feel alone. I put a program together with a recreational therapist several years ago for some facilities, and it's still out there. It's really neat to see. But the activities are really designed to engage the individuals together. And it was so lovely to walk away from that program and say, or hear people say, I've lived here 3 years and I finally feel like I have friends,
Mm.
because the whole idea of the program was to make sure that they're connecting and see their similarities and how can they support one another. And then they were encouraging each other to sit down at the table where they eat and so forth. And These are people with mild cognitive impairment to
Hmm.
earlier stages of dementia. And we long to have connections. We were built to
Yeah,
be connected as human beings. So, just another very important facet of the work that we do and the things that I love doing for people too. So, but if somebody's in a crisis, we need to get them to stability and get
yeah.
them to a situation where things are worked out and stable. And then we can start working on the joy piece.
I mean, that's great. I see both. I see the crisis. I really think the planning ahead of time, because it is some type of eventuality, right? You're either going to age, or your body's not going to be capable of as much, or some diminished capacity. So to articulate that with the team and with your family and your wishes, or have someone who can help you think through that and get
Exactly.
it down is giant. And then maybe to work with their certified financial planner or their wealth management team on how that, for example, when we do our modeling and planning, we could show certain outflows or expenses,
Mhm.
and maybe we can show the overall impact on their estate. What are they going to still be able, they can do gifting, can they do this, can they accomplish all that? That would be very good peace of mind if we could say that can all be accomplished, or this is what can be accomplished, so they didn't have to worry, because these things are they can be very, very expensive.
Mhm.
We see a lot of folks bring in caregivers into the home. Hopefully people get the fact that you need to pay them like employees and have all the FICA and Social Security and all that kind of stuff. I did have a case once where a family didn't do that and later found out, and they owed, their CPA got with them, and they owed a couple $100,000 in expenses they didn't account for. But those are things to think through. The caregiving has gotten expensive. As I understand it, maybe this is just one topic I want to delve down a little bit. I've heard that since the COVID crisis, there is a real shortage of these healthcare workers or caregiver workers. And some of these folks I've heard, so let's say they are a client of mine or someone in my who works with a team like me, they may have sufficient resources to cover all this stuff, but they may literally be in competition for a really good, really competent caregiver, and they're hard to find. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think there's some really great private caregivers, and as you mentioned, they are your employee in at least in the state of California. In other states, it may not be as crucial, but the person should have a background check regardless, and there should be some backup for that individual unless you're really using them very part-time. But after 9 hours, they will earn overtime, and so all of those things need to be considered in their wages too. I'm finding things kind of level out a little bit. It was pretty horrific earlier days of COVID, and it's hard work too, oftentimes
Yeah,
on
for
the
sure.
client. And minimum wage has gone up, and depending on your city or county, it may be higher than other cities. And it's certainly higher up in Northern California than it is down in Southern California. But all of that said, if you use an agency that has vetted everyone and has done their background checks and so forth, not that issues don't come up, but you often get someone who they also call a care manager. They're managing the staff, the caregivers. They pay the workers' comp, they pay all the insurance and the liability and that sort of thing to have that person who will not be your employee in their employment. And so if you don't like the caregiver, we switch them out. If we want
Yeah.
to train them to do something a little bit differently, we can work with them on that. And sometimes great caregivers can become part of the family too, because they're such an integral part of care. And there's some really lovely people who are in this industry. So some that shouldn't be, but for the most part, I think there's a real big heart for doing this kind of work. And
Right.
so it's certainly gone up. That's, I think, the biggest challenge in addition, that the cost of care is closer to $40 an hour now, depending on the agency and so forth.
Yeah. I have someone right now in a both mom and dad have gone into a facility, and it's 26K a month. So
Mm,
they are draining down their estate pretty at a pretty good clip. but and they actually have an adult, their eldest daughter is doing a terrific job. They're in a place, but they've managed it. But not everyone does. I can't encourage enough to have this conversation. Have someone like, the lay of the land, you see all these different states of folks to plan it out, because it will happen, versus being in that crisis mode, but
Sure.
you'll respond to the crisis mode as well.
Well, and I think the important thing too is people can use as much or as little as they need us. So sometimes we have people who are very high functioning, working, driving, young. They're in their 60s, 70s, and they're doing very well, maybe retired, maybe not retired. And we meet with them a couple times a year just to go through any changes in their medications, any changes in their medical conditions. And that way we store that information. We have a relationship with them. So when their daughter from New Jersey needs that support, we sit down with them and we say, we have your back, and we have everything
That's
here
great.
to make sure that you're empowered and that your parent is empowered with everything that they need to. So those are and I think we're also very cost effective too for people trying to figure things out. We had someone who moved their father from LA County into Riverside County, and the benefits changed as far as the hospice service he was on, and they were concerned and confused about what kind of Medicare insurance and so on and so forth. And he had spent, I think it was like 11 hours or something like that, trying to figure all this stuff out. And I guided him in less than an hour in what to do and set up the services. So if you're frustrated, we've done this several hundred times.
Yeah.
And if you've done it 2 or 3 times, that's a lot too. But just
Right.
know that if you need that extra support or you need those pinpointed resources, they should go to you, where you have your trusted team of resources. They can come to our office. We provide a consultation. Any of your clients,
Okay.
Rob, any of your clients, will provide a free consultation with them. Your
That is
clients.
enormously powerful. So you develop a relationship early on and express sort of these wishes, but you get to know these folks and the family before things are needed, but realizing there's a very high probability at some point this is, something's going to trigger between a husband and wife, is what I'm hearing you say. I mean, I'm just thinking of the analogy of the folks I deal with. A lot of times I've worked with them for 15, 20, 25 years. So just that familiarity and knowing their values, or maybe how they built their wealth. Maybe it's
Right.
several $1,000,000, but I remember when they came in with 350K and what they've been through. And I know an awful lot about all their preferences and their values. And you
Exactly.
just have a perspective. And when you're interacting with their children or adult children, we really seek to make those connections with those children, with their grandchildren. And a lot of times the really sort of sage folks just do this. They understand that. Like, I have a guy right now, he's 103. So I deal with his adult daughter, but he
Amazing.
introduced me like 20 years ago. So we've had and now she's largely kind of in charge of his care. That is super wise, but there's other people who hold their cards their whole time and don't just, and then don't deal with anything until we had a gentleman who, super dear client, he passed away. I got a call from an attorney. He had lost his wife, who I worked with as well, like 15 years ago, but just never asked for help, never burdened anyone, but he was totally suffering. I had some other clients who are friends of his trying to help him out, but he just wouldn't take the care. And he passed like in his mid 70s. The funds flowed out to his children because we had set that up. But it just really sad. A real prince of a guy. He had the resources, but he really could have benefited from some planning, or someone saying, you deserve this care. You talk about loneliness too. I mean, that is boy, oh boy, it's not just like a senior or something. I mean, it's, from what I understand, it is such a powerful driver these days, especially post-COVID. Things are changing, but they say that loneliness is so common, and it's right up there with smoking in terms of being as,
Deadly.
negatively impactful on your
It's
health, maybe more.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It
you might even
is.
be better just being a full-on smoker, but who's like fulfilled and has relationships than, yeah, it's pretty giant. So I love this. And then it's a complimentary plan. We could introduce you, we could integrate that with some of our planning. I think, and I'm sorry to take over the mic so much here, but I've just seen so many cases, and then someone who plans it out and then their wishes are executed as they like, and realize the big driver is, let's say some dementia or something like that comes in, then you may no longer be in a position to articulate that. And so the
Exactly.
fact that you've laid it out and communicated to those family members, that is a huge, huge value. Or for even husband and wife, what if one of them, I've just seen a lot of cases over the years, and and some early onset Alzheimer's and things like that, or dementia. That's a huge, I want to explore this area further, because I have a decent number of clients, and we're just starting to see this more and more common, where all of a sudden we're in a situation, or but I'd love this as a resource for folks, because it's just, they build up this estate, over their life, and it's their lives, but they could be in this state for decades, right?
And the big
Yeah.
thing is prevention, and what kinds of things can we do to really support individual to maintain their independence as long as possible and not suffer in
Yeah.
silence. And there's a difference too. We could talk about this, but there's a difference between loneliness and self-isolating too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just so important to really look at sharing what you want. And
Yeah.
we have more like a touch and tech kind of program that we do
Hmm.
in talking about some of the younger people that we work with and older people. I've actually done this with somebody who was 96 years old. We have sensors set up in the house. She had a great situation. She did not have any caregivers in the house. She really refused them. She could afford them, actually. She
Hmm.
had wonderful neighbors. She had a little system where she put her blind down in the evening before she went to bed, and then she would raise her blind when she woke up in the morning. The neighbors would look
Uh-huh.
at, oh, I see her windows up. Her
Right.
blind, she's in great shape. And somebody called me one day and said, I'm really worried about her because it's 11:30 and her blind isn't up. And I
Yeah.
said, well, let me check, because the sensors actually alert us to say they're outside of their pattern.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
it hadn't alerted us. And I checked and I said, no, she's walking around in the house. I can see that she's been in the kitchen and so forth. So
Hmm.
she just forgot to raise the blind. And then there
Mm.
was a day that the sensor, the company did contact us and say there's no motion in the kitchen. It
Mm.
was outside of her pattern. She would go and get her medication and so on and so forth, have her little breakfast, sit down in her one little chair, read her paper.
Hmm.
And so I went running over to see her, and she answered the door and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I just came to check on you and make sure you're okay. And she had, on the opposite side of the house, she had set a blind down in the kitchen that she never put down. And so it blocked the sensor. And I just
Ah.
didn't let her know what happened. And I moved the sensor to another location. But we kept her there for another year and a half in the house, and she did not have to have a caregiver. We had a great program for her where people were picking her up and doing certain things throughout the entire week with her. But she was really able to maintain her independence, and she had a certain way of cooking that we didn't have to be concerned about. But there are all kinds of great things we can tell if you're cooking and you left the stove on. We don't have to have cameras, but we can have cameras. I can tell if somebody is leaving. We set this up for my mom. She said, I'm alone now. I'm a little concerned that if I don't wear something around my neck, what's going to
Yeah.
happen? And so some of the technology now, you don't need to have that on. There are other things that you can wear outside of the house that would help us to know that you were in trouble too. I love using air tags in people's cars, their purses, in their car, like their
Yeah.
glove compartment. And it helps us to understand where they may be. Do we need to worry or not? Sometimes when we live alone, it doesn't matter how old we are. We kind of want to make sure somebody knows what's going on, and you really need to look at who's your person. So we're happy to be your person, but we're also happy to be the person who supports your person, if that makes sense. when you have a decision maker, we want to empower them as much as possible. We want to empower you. So anyway, there's tons of options and tons of ways to approach it because you're a unique individual, your situation, your values, everything. And we want to understand those and follow those to the extent that we're able to.
That is amazing. Talk about definition of having your back right there. I love that. I mean, I love that she's engaged the neighbors to look for the blinds, but you also have sensors. You stopped by personally if something was out of pattern. I don't know why anyone wouldn't take someone up. Think about this, folks. I can connect you with Mary. Her contact info will be in the show notes. I'd probably like to explore this topic further because I really think it's key. And then I'm thinking of some of the own sensors I have now, even like my phone or some other devices. I track my sleep through a tracker, but there's things. Do you ever get these alerts? It's time to move around or move your,
Sure.
because you've been
Have
sitting
another
too
glass
long.
of water.
Have another. I don't get that one, but I'll get one. It's time to start preparing, for sleep, so I'm on schedule. Or, I know even the sound, but when I walk the dog and stuff, I'll make sure and bring some ID. Or, what if you had a health incident, you just collapsed on the sidewalk? You want some backup just out there, so somebody, or even on your phone, right? There's a thing you can put in like an SOS or your emergency contact. So I love having all these backups if someone's comfortable, and the conversation ahead of time, and just sort of going in for an overview. And then you bring up all these ideas they may not have thought about. How do we ensure these additional things? And that kind of liberates them to live their life, and not be as worried because somebody's kind of watching their back when they may not be in a household full of people like they used to be when they were raising their family or that kind of thing. So this is huge. Yeah.
It is. Rob, I think most people, unless they've been through it themselves with their own parent or a spouse, say, they just don't think about it because you've never been through it before. It's like if you've never had kids before, you don't know what to expect. Or if you've never been to France and you don't know what to expect, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to kind of start to wrap up, but yes, you're 100% correct because I had this experience. My mother predeceased my grandmother, so I had to care for my grandmother up till about 103, but I was in like my early 30s. I had just gotten married, I was so unprepared. And, you have other things to do in life, but that's how it hits a lot of these folks. They're just not prepared. It's a huge burden. You're kind of taking over someone's life. It's really, really, really difficult. You're trying to make decisions but you don't have the experience. So to bring in a team or someone like yourself who's seen lots of cases, who understands how it works and is in touch with that, and sort of engage that person to have help in the process, just relieves so much stress, and it's such a better outcome. I wish I'd known about this at that time. But I do know a lot about it because I actually did have to go through it. And that isn't always, you learn a lot about it, but there's a lot of learning lessons. And I think it's a lot better to have you engaged where all these things because you've developed the expertise, but to have some support.
Yeah, but it makes you a better advocate for your clients too, because you know what could be around the corner. So you're already planning for those things. Not because you want them to be in a disaster, you're trying to avoid the crisis, to take that scare out of it, to take that
100%.
power out of an emergency. We want to empower people. So I think your experience with your grandmother is a primary reason why you do what you do and the way you do it. So kudos to you. Thank you.
Yeah, kudos, but having looked back at it, and I think it's part of why I'm so sensitive to this subject, because I see a lot of people going through it. I did the best I could, and I tried to really be loving and caring, but looking back, I could have done a lot better. I just didn't know how. And I think a lot of people are thrust into this situation. So maybe bringing on a team like yours to ensure a better outcome is just a total win for everybody, So let's explore further. Thank you for the work you're doing, with these folks at a certain age in life.
Yeah, we
It's
love it.
coming.
We love it. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm seeing it come up a lot. So really us exploring this, I can certainly introduce folks. I can discuss these issues too, but I don't, we do wealth management and financial planning and custom asset management, which is another aspect I didn't bring up, but most all the RIA firms in the country, they manage money in one of five models, kind of a cookie cutter pie chart asset allocation. We do complete custom asset management. And when someone is in this kind of a caregiving situation, spending 26K a month, it's a giant advantage. So I won't go too far into it, but thanks for what you're doing. I really think we should explore this further. I'd like to delve into it. It's coming to everyone, to everyone's family, and the planning and the understanding. And then you letting us know there's resources. Hey, we're using advanced technology to help make their lives better. And if they're not spying on, they're looking out for their welfare. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're very non-invasive forms
Yeah.
of this, and you can choose who sees the information as well. So it's really important. We did have somebody with a camera. I'll just close with this. We had somebody with a camera, and she was just like all of us. She was going out the front door at 3 o'clock in the morning, which was obviously alarming. She needed to sweep apparently, but she would open her refrigerator door constantly. And I was like, why did she open her refrigerator? Oh, she's doing the same thing I do or anybody else does. What's in my fridge? Do I want to eat something?
Yeah.
But it provides some great information without really getting into, just seeing what you're doing and it's not invasive. So just great information, great predictors that we can prevent things. Look at when your gait is off, or look at when your patterns are outside of what they normally do, or you getting up to use the restroom multiple times and you hadn't before. That gives us an indication there may be an infection or something that way. So all kinds of great things that help us to guide, support, and care and prevent things from getting worse than they could be. So
wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, the gate is off, or maybe, and in fact, I was playing tennis recently with someone. He's a senior, but he kind of went for a low ball, and then his Apple Watch said, "Have you fallen? Do you need me to call?" And he was sort of like, "No, I'm," So they're just in case. But that's so interesting. Mary, thank you so much. We've known each other for a long time, and she's a great resource. So thanks again. Thanks for being here for the 50th episode. If you like or enjoy this, please share it with others. Share the podcast. I view this one as a real evergreen resource in terms of further conversations with clients or people we interact with. We can share this, or if someone's starting to go through this, they can hear this discussion, whether they're driving around or whatever. But thank you for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. As you can see, we've aligned ourselves with a lot of very dedicated, highly experienced, caring professionals who want to help. So if we can be of any help, let me or my team know. And thank you for being here, and make it a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Millionaire Next Door podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Signature Estate and Investment Advisors. Signature Estate and Investment Advisors, LLC, SEIA, is an SEC registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. Securities offered through Signature Estate Securities LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through SEIA LLC, 2121 Avenue of the Stars, Suite 1600, Los Angeles, California, 90067. Telephone number 310-712-2323.